Kaleem. Welcome to Future Speak.
Always reassess and collect information. Don't make decisions based on this is how I as a leader feel. It's not about you as a leader. It's about your team.
I know that I kind of hunted you down to come on when I was seeing your profile. I've seen you everywhere across LinkedIn, all the great stuff you're doing with remote work and helping organizations. And I really wanted to talk to you today about what the future of work, which is here now, right? But where are we going to go with this? So before we dive in, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody?
Well, thanks, Sam, for having me on. I really, really appreciate it. It's been a long road. My partner and I, we started Blend Me Inc., our consultancy, in 2013. And the goal was just, at the time, was just for it to be a side hustle. Just to kind of do something strategic and to really just kind of do something cerebral in the remote workspace. And so we moved from Maine in 2007, Maine to Atlanta, Georgia. So for the global audience, it's really northeast of the United States and cold, very similar to the climate in London, in the UK. And then we moved to Atlanta, Georgia, which is the southeast, which is much, much warmer. So yeah, we moved here in 2007. And, after attending a web development conference, I saw somebody talk about remote work and this was in 2012, DrupalCon Denver. Shout out to the Drupal community. It's an open source CMS platform. And I was there and I heard an individual talk about, his name was Matt Westgate from a company called Lullabot. And it was just a fascinating presentation. Their clients were like the Grammys.com, MarthaStewart.com, really big sites. And he talked about how they got rid of their office like the year before and they're a fully remote company. But he used the term fully distributed. And I had never heard that term before, right? And he explained why, Sam. He was like, we didn't like the way the term had this feeling behind that you're away from something, that you're remote, that you're separated from something. So they weren't fully distributed. And it was just, again, a fascinating presentation about how their culture was. And he was showing pictures of their retreat in Florida. People all over the country working around the world as well, working in Europe. And just on a plane ride home, I just remember thinking, geez, that's some great information. I linked up with my partner. She has a master's degree in organizational development and human resources from the University of Connecticut. And so we incorporated in 2013 and the rest is history. So yeah, I guess that's a little bit about me. As far as fun, what do I like to do? I just got into mountain biking probably about 4 years or 5 years ago. And at some point in 7th grade, I got into metal music. So I listened to metal music and ride my mountain bike. And that's my whole story.
Well, my husband would love you with the metal music and the biking. So it could be a beautiful thing happening there, Kaleem.
Well, it sounds like we're coming. It sounds like you just sent an invite. So
it does, doesn't it? So I'm going to take you to March 2020. So for us, that's when we went into lockdown, right? For us in the UK, that's when the world changed. And I know in the US, you also went into your lockdown.
Yes.
What happened to you? What's your journey been since then?
That's a great question. Thank you. And I have to stop saying that's a great question. People out there in the podcast world, give us another phrase that we can say to acknowledge a wonderful question. At that time, thank you for asking that because, again, we started as a side hustle with no stress in 2013, right? Fast forward to 2019, I ended up taking a job as a front-end engineer, web developer. And, our big client was Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is probably one of the state's largest insurance companies. And I realized it was a lonely job as a developer, it was tough. And, track and billable hours is difficult for myself. But in March of 20, my partner and I, we went to Maine and we're going to wait it out thinking, Atlanta has about 6 million people, just to give people an idea. And this whole state of Maine has 1 million people. So one little city, probably Georgia, has 18 million. So I don't know what the numbers are, but like it's a lot less people in the state of Maine. And during that time, I just received a lot of phone calls and, people from my previous clients, my mentors saying, congratulations, the whole world has now gone remote. Everyone in the whole world was working remotely, where before it was probably, I have US stats, but like think globally, it was like 3% of the workforce was working remotely, and now it was like at 90. So for me, I admit, I tell people about this a lot. Pandemic remote work is not normal remote work. And I think the challenge that I have with a lot of research today, a lot of what people are saying, a lot of what leadership is talking about, it's almost as if the data and what leadership and what individuals have experienced is not the true experience. When lockdown happened, I'm a remote worker. I'm a remote advocate. I'm a remote work consultant. When we were in Maine, I didn't like it. I didn't like pandemic remote. I've been doing it for years, but I didn't like it. And the reasons why is you couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't do any of the things that we would advise companies to do. So yeah, for me, I feel like there was some excitement when my mentor was like, the whole world's remote. So I did leave my engineering job in June 1st of 2020 to do Blend full time. And I think because we've had a digital footprint since 2013, there has been some success. I've been able to speak a ton. And, I had an opportunity to be, quoted in HBR, Harvard Business Review, and, spoke for United Airlines, Visa, and spoke with Meta. And, this past year, thankfully, LinkedIn reached out and was like, hey, we'd like to list you as one of the top 10 remote work voices. So that was really great. The progression happened quickly. But again, I would say that what is challenging for me and what's challenging for a lot of people is seeing a lot of this research come out, seeing a lot of these statements by leadership, seeing all these things, and really it being based on kind of bad data. The data that we would want to really look at would be prior to the pandemic. And then, are we coming out of it? Yes, we'll see this winter. But there may always be a little bit of fear of moving forward, of, contracting sickness and different, all sorts of things. Like I would just say the isolation and the loneliness hit me as well. And in addition to that, when you add, we have a little one who was doing online school, and then my partner was full-time home. So my awesome daily office with no distractions became very stressful.
I bet it did.
For everyone. So one last statement, I'll say it again for everyone. Pandemic remote, what you've experienced the past 2 years, if you're new to this, it's not the normal experience.
Yeah, and Kaleem, I'd agree with you. And when I look at where we're at now, what I get really irritated by is, okay, so the world had to shut down overnight. Whether you get it, understand it or not, it happened. We're now in a situation where we're going, okay, so we've had our entire workforce out there. I agree with you. It's not normal. And some organizations had that short-term mindset, right? It
Correct.
was,
yes.
Okay,
yes.
So we're only going to do this for a short time. We're all in this together. We've lost that. And I don't know where and I don't know how. We've lost that sense of community and trust that we had towards that beginning. And now we're saying, I want you back in the workforce. And by the way, subliminally, I don't trust you.
Thank you, Sam.
Talk to me about this.
Doesn't that hit hard though, Sam? I mean, it's very, very, very frustrating. And I definitely won't get political because no one wants to talk politics.
No, agreed.
There seems to always be a small minority that makes the decisions for the majority in all things. because I just honestly feel like if you ask any human around the world in all these different cultures and languages, like, what is it that they want in life? There's a part of me that believes like some of the roots would be very similar. Of course, there's going to be differences, but like most people want to just be happy, right? This idea of requiring people back to the office, it feels icky. Like I I don't know I don't know how like proper you are on this podcast, but it just hit me that I was once talking to a colleague from the UK, and he was like, it's a cock up, and I was
Yeah.
like, excuse me. I was like, I need to understand that more. And that's what it feels like. It just feels like there are other reasons besides what people are saying as to why as to why leadership wants to go back to the office. So I just don't feel like it's genuine, this return to the office. I don't feel like they're being honest. To me, if I were an employee, and you're absolutely right about trust. So what we at Blend, we've created what we call TREE, the remote employee experience. I mean, we got to come up with our own cheesy acronym. Everyone has an acronym, so we needed one too. But so TREE stands for the T, it's the remote employee experience, of course, but the T stands for trust. And with trust, it's a two-way street.
Right.
So the employer has to assume trust. You've heard that saying, trust is earned. But no, in this case, trust must be assumed because they haven't seen you in a remote work environment. So T stands for trust. The employer needs to trust that you're going to get the job done and you're going to meet with your team and do well. But on the flip side, the employee has to trust that the employer is going to follow through on all of those things that they read on their website and the job description, in the interviews, that they're going to follow through on the things that they said. So that's trust. So yeah, when someone says you've hit all of your numbers, you've performed unbelievably, you are happy. I can see it in your face. Happier. Oh, by the way, because we're no longer at risk of dying. That's literally what it took. It literally took the whole globe to be at risk of death to allow this freedom and flexibility. So it is about trust, and it does hurt. Every individual contributor, and I feel bad for the managers and people operations departments because they have to deliver this message and they don't want to deliver the message. Let's be honest. So it really does feel, it just feels like a slap in the face, doesn't it? We worked hard all these years.
Yeah.
And now I don't care how great you were. You're going to have to drive in or take the public transportation into the office and literally do the same thing next that you would do at your house. I just don't know how we're going to go back, honestly.
And here's the real salt in the wounds to all of this, right? So we're saying, okay, so now we want you to come back. We're using terminology, and it was Steve Cadigan that really gave me a light bulb moment on this. We want you to return to work. So wait a minute, are you saying that the last 2 years I haven't been working? So not only are you saying you don't trust me...
Well, they were genius on that, Sam. They were genius on that. Somebody quickly realized it was not return to work. It was return to office.
Yep.
Like somebody was like, whoa, let's put an O in there instead of return to work. But you're right. I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just thinking like, geez, like you're right. Like I did hear people say, oh, we need to return back to work. And it's like...
Yeah. And the other side of that now is with the price of petrol and gas prices. So all of that's gone up for me. I may well have to pay parking. My childcare is going to go on through the roof. If I can still get childcare, because that might have closed. But you're also now telling me, number one, you don't trust me, and two, you don't care.
Yeah.
Right? So again, let's talk about these things, this great resignation, this great reset, this great forget it. People have always left organizations, but they are now leaving because we are giving them reasons in spades.
Yeah, I don't know who I heard said this. I think it might have been Chris Ronzio. Shout out to Chris Ronzio, the CEO from Trainual. But, and I could have got this wrong, so shout out if I got it wrong, Chris. Today's freedom, so there's, you go through history and there's people revolt for freedom. That's generally what happens, right? Today's freedom is autonomy.
Agreed.
We are a global, we're all pushing resources. I mean, we're just always going. But what people experience is autonomy, which equals freedom. Whoa, you mean I don't have to do my work from 8 to 5 p.m.? I could do my work from 6 to 10 if I wanted? Once people get, just think, have you ever heard a history when people fought for freedom, said, oh, I want to go back. I had this freedom, oh, I want to go back. It just doesn't happen that way. So to me, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens over the next few years, because there's a lot of people that are just like, I've tasted this freedom and I don't want to go back.
Agreed. And, let's call it, there's going to be some people who love the idea, and that's fine. What we're talking about here is the opportunity that remote work gives us is the opportunity to have that freedom. And interestingly, I went to an event recently and I was saying, here's the thing, we are all part of a chain, right? In that
Correct.
You've got the C-suite here who are going, we can't keep up. We can't keep up with this change. It's going too fast. So they then look at their HR and their CHROs and their CPOs and that suite there and are like, help. They, in then turn, go out to their external HR and L&D and DEIB and all of that. That's where we come in. So obviously we are business coaching that third level down there. But if people like me as business coaches, yes, we help their business grow. We do the classic stuff, your cash flow, your sales and marketing. But if we don't get them thinking like this and understanding that and bridging their agenda to we're building our business to actually looking at all of this, then we're just going to keep going round in circles, right?
Yeah. Sometimes, I'm trying to be, one of the things I've learned during this pandemic or during the past few years is really just trying to be a lot more empathetic. And I feel like there was a moment, the whole globe was, like you said, in this together. And, it's like in those movies, Armageddon, when the aliens come or something like that, the whole world just comes together. It's like, let's come together and fight off evil forever. I feel like leadership, I feel a little bad for some C-suite, because the reality is you've worked this way your whole life. You've learned, you've moved up the executive ladder doing certain things, playing golf, going to these things, being a part of this system, and you don't know, and you're afraid to get away from that thing that you're so confident. You used to walk the floor as a manager earlier on. How are you supposed to manage people if you can't walk the floor? So yeah, I do have a little bit of sympathy for the C-suite, because you're asking them to rethink what they have done for the past 100 years. I mean, no one's really that old probably leading, but that's how long we've been doing that for. So
I agree.
The best we can do is try to educate. And that's really the best that we can do, right? Provide data. And I think that is where people operations, that's what we do at Blend. We're fractional people operations, project-based people operations for remote companies. So, of course, I'm pushing this, but even if it's not us, as an HR professional, reach out to a third party to come in and do some sort of assessment, because a lot of times what happens is you just need reinforcements, because you probably said some of the things that we were going to advise and no one was listening. You pay someone a substantial amount of money, and that's generally where people hire consultants, like Bain & Company and these huge companies. People have an agenda. They know what they want to do, but sometimes they just need some additional voices to kind of talk that through. And I highly highly advise anybody who's having some challenges with implementing a more flexible policy to look into, okay, well, maybe we should bring an external person in, do some sort of assessment and provide us with some data that we can bring to leadership.
Yeah, and you called it. And a lot of the time, that's exactly why people, and particularly in HR leadership, they do bring in external consultants. Number one, the majority of time they've sat in their shoes, right? They get it.
Yeah.
So they can understand how and why they need to provide that help in terms of, okay, we can ask the tough questions that you want to ask, but probably can't.
Right. Yes. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's just like you need that third party to be able to ask that. Kaleem, when we look at, we've spoken a lot about it not going right, people looking backwards. Let's look at the good stuff. Let's talk about remote work when it's done really well. Talk to me more about some of your clients and the benefits they've got from it and their journey to get there.
Oh, I just absolutely love. We are working with a sock manufacturer out of Manhattan, and they approached us in 2021 because they are a manufacturing company. They have a warehouse in North Carolina and then another warehouse in California, and they ship these socks all over the world. Some large clients, Macy's, Marshalls, Costco. You know, they go to Europe, they go to China to look at fabrics. Like, this is a hands-on company. And in their handbook, prior to the pandemic, in their employee handbook, it said, your hours are 8 to 5. Working from home is not allowed.
Whoa.
Literally. So pandemic happens. Their office is like where the New York City Thanksgiving Day parade is, right in the middle there. Luckily, their lease was, what happened is they were sent home. So, no one owns their buildings in New York. They're owned by huge companies. So they were sent home. They had no choice. Everyone must go home. In addition to that, one of their longtime employees, over like a very long time, I think over 15 years or so, 20 years, passed from COVID.
Oh, no.
So the whole company was impacted. They're a company of about 60 people, still run by the family. So they were impacted. That hit them pretty hard. So when they reached out to us, I remember, I'll never forget this. The very first call it was hilarious, total New York, maybe even British tone. Like, hi, Kaleem, it's nice to meet you, but we're probably not going to work with you because you don't have any manufacturing experience. But I'd love to hear what you have to say. And I was like, holy shit. Like, that wasn't even like, hi, nice to meet you. That was the first comment that came out. And, obviously my answer worked. I said, look, I know nothing about socks and manufacturing at all, but if you want to learn how to be a hybrid company, and they wanted to be hybrid, they didn't want to be fully remote, and we can help you. So we helped them. We signed them on. We transitioned all their policies. Their handbook was a PDF, a Word document that no one looked at, of course, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we had to update the handbook to remove that policy. And I would say the best success was when we were doing interviews. This organization is one of very few companies. Again, they only have 60 employees that are managing the process, sales, production, design, and then some employees, warehouse. So obviously the warehouse employees, they had to go in the office throughout the whole pandemic. They had to ship stuff. So, but the executive office in Manhattan, some of the people, when we did interviews, because we do a thorough assessment, we interview everyone in the C-suite, then we interview all the VPs individually, then we interview all the VPs teams without the VPs. So it takes a good amount of time, but the comments that came out were, I can't believe how less stressed I am. The commute times were insane. 2 hours on public transportation. 2 hours each way.
Wow.
Some people. Yeah. So when you heard the comments of, oh, my body doesn't feel as angry. I'm like, your body doesn't feel as angry. Like, yeah, you're not dealing in the trains, and I'm sure the trains are very busy in London as well, but like,
Ugh,
you're
yeah.
not packed up with all those people. You're not dealing with that commute. So for me, I would say that it's our biggest success, because there are not like a company that most people think wouldn't be able to do this hybrid thing. So they require their employees to go into the office once a week, and that's it. And yeah, I just think what they're doing, it's forward thinking, because that industry is not like that, and they're going to have a competitive advantage when they start recruiting. When
Yeah.
they start looking for employees, there's not very many garment companies that are going to let their employees work remotely. So that's a really, really, I think it's forward thinking on their part. But the interesting thing is that their lease ran out in December of 21, or like on some point. So they downsized. They
Wow.
downsized their office. They moved to another space. They downsized, and now they have phone booths. They're doing hot desking. And again, this is a company that makes socks. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's by far our best story.
Kaleem, I love that. And when we look at organizations like this, how are they, when it comes to, you mentioned their recruitment, which got me thinking about what does a good onboarding process look like for these guys? And
Um,
my second question is, how do you go about training and coaching your teams when you've got a
yeah,
remote workforce?
yeah. I would say that excuses that leadership have used, training and mentorship is in there. It's usually like, what is it? Number one is the culture. That's usually the first excuse. Oh, we need the culture back. But oh, by the way, you weren't measuring your culture before the pandemic. So how do you even know that culture is a problem? I'm sorry, I had that little rant. Um, and then the other excuse is oh, well, we can't train the younger or junior employees. We are a mentorship culture. I think that's what Goldman Sachs used for, his excuse was, we are a heavy mentorship culture organization. So how do you do that in a remote company? Well, you have to be intentional. Like, everything has to be scheduled. We enjoy Trainual. I mentioned him twice in this podcast. Come on, Chris, you got to give me something out of that. But what we like is the idea of thinking it as online courses and developing the onboarding in different modules. The other thing is that most people think that onboarding is just the first 30 days. And we tell people, no, onboarding can be up to 18 months, even a year. And the best way to kind of do that is to kind of spread those things out over time. So as a new employee, you want to have some things set up for pre-boarding. Pre-boarding is a term we use when you're talking about things that you do before your official start date. So you might even send out the offer letter, right? You send out, great companies are sending out computers before the start date, right? Getting you all prepared, and also providing you with all of your onboarding expectations. So what we like to do is we like to set up different modules that include videos, that include quizzes on the content, and we keep the modules short. You want to keep the modules probably between 3 and 5 minutes, because people need to be able to do this onboarding asynchronously when it's
Yeah.
convenient for them. So in addition to that, managers need to be able to see the progress of each employee. So what I love about remote work is that everything is trackable. So how else do you learn? Mentorships, one-on-ones with your manager. Well, with remote work, you can see whether you met with someone because you probably had a calendar. So I just, with training, and onboarding, just like with everything else in remote work, everything has to be planned and scheduled, and it has to be intentional, and it has to be able to be done asynchronously. You have different time zones, you have different
Yep.
requirements throughout the day. So I think that those are really the big keys: coming up with a strategy, following that strategy, and then kind of implementing that on a scheduled basis. You know.
Yeah, and all of that makes sense. And I really wanted you to share that because I figured you might go the route of, well, we can't do that. We need to see them face to face. So I'm glad we had that discussion.
Well, Sam, the one thing I would like to mention, my brother, he is a director at Dow Technologies. And one thing he talks